My parents thought they could trick me into handing over my inheritance to my golden child brother. But I exposed them. I'm 29M, and for as long as I can remember, my parents have played favorites with my younger brother, Aaron, 27M. In our family, Aaron was the sun, moon, and stars. He'd mess up, grades, relationships, even got into trouble with the law once, and my parents would still pull him close, showering him with unconditional love. I, on the other hand, was treated like a tenant, maybe even a glorified servant, someone there to handle the things Aaron couldn't be bothered with. If you're wondering if I've exaggerated, let me paint you a few pictures. When I was 16, my parents decided to dip into my college fund to buy Aaron a car. Mind you, Aaron was 14 at the time, didn't even have his learner's permit. When I found out, they just shrugged. He'll need it when he turns 16. We can always figure out your tuition later, my dad said with that look of discussion over. That's how it always went in our house. Aaron's needs, Aaron's future, Aaron's comfort. All of it trumped anything I might have going on. I scraped together enough scholarships, took out loans, and worked 2 jobs during college because I had no other choice. Meanwhile, Aaron went to a private high school, courtesy of the rest of what should have been my tuition money. When he got into college, they didn't just cover his expenses, they spoiled him. I'm talking dorm upgrades, meal plans, spending money, the whole 9 yards. But I kept telling myself that maybe I could finally break away, get some space, live my own life without being dragged down by their nonsense. And then my grandpa died last year. My grandpa was one of the only people in my life who truly saw me. He'd sit me down, tell me stories about his life, ask me how I was doing, if I needed anything. He wasn't wealthy by any means, but he had a small amount of savings and stocks, something he'd built up over years of living frugally. So when he passed, and I found out he'd left me a decent inheritance, enough to help pay off my college loans and maybe start putting something aside for the future, I felt this strange sense of relief. Like maybe he'd finally given me something that would let me walk away from my family's insanity once and for all. Aaron got a share too, but much smaller. Grandpa had made it clear that he wanted me to have a shot at something. Something I'd never had because my parents had always prioritized Aaron. When my parents found out about the inheritance, they were civil at first. Too civil. They acted like they were happy for me, like they understood why Grandpa had done what he did. But I knew my parents too well. That fake warmth? It's how they start when they're about to pull some kind of twisted trick. And I was right. One evening, about a month after the funeral, I got a call from my parents, asking me to come over to their house for a family discussion. I remember standing on their front porch that night, the sky darkening, feeling this gut-level dread. Like I knew what was coming, but just didn't want to admit it. I walked in, and there they were, sitting with a lawyer, a man I'd never seen before. My dad wasted no time. "We've been looking over Grandpa's will," he said, all businesslike, as though this was just another task he had to tick off his list. "And we think it's only fair if you share some of the inheritance with Aaron." There it was, the moment they'd been waiting for. The look on my dad's face was almost smug, as if he'd expected me to just roll over and hand over what little I'd finally been given. The nerve of it still blows my mind. I remember looking down at the document he slid across the table toward me. I didn't want to touch it, like it was some kind of venomous thing that would sink its teeth into me if I so much as lifted a finger. The lawyer, a slimy-looking guy with slicked-back hair, gave me this tight-lipped smile and said, "It's just a formality, really. By signing this, you're ensuring that everyone's taken care of. Family, you know?" I looked from the lawyer to my parents, and something in me just snapped. "No," I said, as calm as I could manage. My mom's face twisted, like I'd slapped her across the cheek. "What do you mean, no?" she asked, her voice laced with shock and indignation, as if I were some unruly child who dared defy her. "I mean, no. Grandpa left me that money. For once, something was actually meant for me. And I'm not giving it up," I replied, staring her down. My dad leaned forward, trying to soften his tone, but I could see the anger behind his eyes. "Listen, this is about Aaron, too. You know he's been going through a rough time, and he needs support." "Support?" I laughed, unable to hold it in. "Support like the college fund you drained so he could have a car? Or the money you spent on his private school tuition while I took out loans?" My mom got teary-eyed, leaning into her usual routine. "Why do you always have to make everything about money?" she sniffled. This is about family, about being there for each other. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After years of having everything taken from me, they were trying to guilt-trip me by claiming I was the selfish one. It was like some twisted, upside-down version of reality. I sat there, staring at them, a million things running through my mind. For once, I decided to say exactly what I felt. You know, I've spent my whole life watching you pour everything into Aaron, I said, my voice shaking but steady. Everything. My college fund, all your time, every ounce of emotional support you ever had to give. You both made it so clear that he was the chosen one, and I was just there. To be used. To fill the gaps when you needed something. And now, finally, Grandpa saw through all of it. He saw me. And you can't stand it, can you? My dad's face turned red, and my mom, in her classic move, covered her mouth in shock, pretending to be hurt by my cruelty. We have always done our best for you both, my dad said, grinding his teeth. We've made sacrifices. Sacrifices. I interrupted, letting out a bitter laugh. You made sacrifices for Aaron. Not for me. Every time I needed you, you reminded me that Aaron was the one who needed support, that Aaron was going through a rough patch, that Aaron had potential. Every time, you left me in the dust. The lawyer sat there, looking like he wanted to disappear into his briefcase. He tried clearing his throat, as if he had something to add, but my mom gave him a little nod, a signal to stay out of it. Fine, my mom said, her voice a strange mix of sweetness and steel. You can keep the money, but don't think this doesn't come without consequences. Family is everything. You think you're going to just walk away and live happily ever after? We'll see how you feel when you're all alone, when you have no one to turn to. She was actually threatening me with loneliness, as if that would scare me into submission. After everything they'd put me through, the constant gaslighting and neglect, did they really think I was afraid to walk away? Funny thing is, I replied, standing up, I think I've been alone my whole life. It'll be a relief not to have you reminding me of it anymore. I turned and walked out. They didn't call after me, didn't try to stop me. In fact, I could hear them already whispering furiously to each other as I shut the door behind me. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. I didn't hear from my parents, didn't hear from Aaron. I thought for a brief, blissful moment that maybe they'd accepted it. Maybe they realized they couldn't control me anymore. But deep down, I knew better. They weren't the type to just let something go, not when they were losing. And sure enough, I got a letter in the mail one morning. It was from a different lawyer this time, one I didn't recognize, and it spelled out everything my parents had threatened. They were going to contest the will. They claimed Grandpa was manipulated by me in his final days and wasn't of sound mind when he made the decision to leave me the majority of his estate. It was a baseless, twisted lie, but they were actually trying to drag this into court. I'll admit, I sat there, staring at that letter for a long time. They were trying to rip apart the one good thing I'd been given. The one thing that felt like justice after years of being pushed aside. They wanted to exhaust me, drag me down to the point where I'd just give up to make it stop. And I almost did. I nearly called the lawyer, ready to cave, to give them whatever they wanted just so I wouldn't have to deal with it. But then something in me snapped. It was like a switch flipped. They had underestimated me my whole life, expected me to be their punching bag, their backup plan, their obedient kid who would just fall in line and take whatever scraps they tossed my way. But I was done playing that role. I called up my own lawyer, a tough, no-nonsense woman who didn't blink when I explained the situation. I told her everything, laid out every ugly detail. And when I was done, she looked at me and said, "They're going to regret this." And she was right. The court process took months. During that time, my parents and Aaron went all out, doing everything they could to paint me as some manipulative monster who'd conned Grandpa. They even roped in distant relatives, people who hadn't seen me in years, feeding them stories that I was this greedy, ungrateful son who'd taken advantage of a frail old man. It was disgusting, seeing how low they were willing to go, how easily they could twist everything to make me look like the bad guy. At one point, my mom called me, trying to play nice. She apologized for the misunderstanding and suggested we work it out like family. She even had the gall to say, "Aaron's been through enough lately. He doesn't need this kind of stress." It was the same old script, the same tired line that it was my job to keep the peace, to sacrifice for Aaron. I told her flat out, "You dragged me into this. You're the ones making this ugly." and I'm done being your punching bag." I hung up and blocked her number. When we finally went to court, I was ready. I had witnesses lined up, people who knew Grandpa well, people who'd heard him talk about why he left me the inheritance. My lawyer tore through every baseless accusation they threw my way, showing the court exactly what kind of people my parents were. I'll never forget the look on my dad's face when the judge ruled in my favor, dismissing their claims with a sharp reprimand. It was as if he'd never even considered the possibility that I'd actually win. The courtroom was silent as the verdict sank in, and I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders, years of resentment and hurt finally breaking free. My parents stormed out, practically dragging Aaron with them. He shot me one last look, a mix of anger and something else, maybe pity, maybe regret. I don't know, and I don't really care. As far as I was concerned, they'd chosen their path, and I'd finally chosen mine. After that, I went low contact with them. I couldn't bear to cut them out entirely. Not yet, anyway. But I stopped going to family events, stopped answering their calls, stopped letting them guilt-trip me into being a good son. I moved on slowly, putting one piece of my life back together at a time. I paid off my loans, bought a modest house, and started living for myself in a way I'd never been allowed to before. Months passed, and I started to feel the weight of my decision in the best possible way, a lightness I hadn't experienced before. For once, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for my parents' next demand, or fearing the next family discussion where I'd be asked to sacrifice my needs for Aaron's comfort. I was finally free. Then last Christmas, I got a card in the mail from my parents. Inside, there was a short, handwritten note from my mom. "Family is family, and doors are never really closed. Remember that." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of everything they'd put me through. Just a reminder that, in their minds, I was still the one responsible for keeping the family together, for forgiving and forgetting. I didn't respond. And that's where I am now, reclaiming my life, one day at a time. It's not easy. Some days, I still feel the guilt creeping in, those voices telling me I should just go back, make amends, be the good son they raised me to be. But then I remember everything they've done, every line they crossed, and I remind myself that I deserve better. I deserve a family that doesn't see me as a tool to be used, but as a person who matters. I don't know if they'll ever change. Maybe one day they'll come around, see the damage they've done, and try to make things right. But even if they don't, I'm done letting them drag me down. I have my life, my freedom, and the knowledge that I stood up for myself when it mattered most. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is worth more than any inheritance in the world.